Ben, thank you very much. Some of you may know this because I say it in tiresome fashion on television every now and then. I am from Virginia. I grew up in Northern Virginia. I went to the University of Virginia, and I'm wearing my UVA cufflinks today in honor of the governor of Virginia. Let's test your Virginia knowledge, ladies and gentlemen. Is Virginia a state? How many say Virginia is a state? Raise your hand. It is not a state. It is a commonwealth. How many of you knew that? Oh, look at that. Okay, great. Then the rest of you just had no idea. There were so few of you who raised your hand. At any rate, it is great to welcome today the governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Glenn Youngkin. He has been the governor since earlier this year. He won a close contest last year, and he's part of a new wave of candidates who is blazing a new trail in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Please welcome the governor of Virginia, the Honorable Glenn Youngkin, and Ylan Mui.
Well, hello, everybody. Can't just sit there. Hello. Nice to see everybody. It is so much fun to be back in this environment, and so thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad that you're bringing the energy. They don't need a cup of coffee. They can just listen to our conversation.
There we go.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get started with first a disclosure, which is, like Tyler, I live in Virginia. I'm a Virginia resident. I'm a Virginia voter.
There's a trend here, by the way.
There is a trend here. Virginia produces great journalists.
Yes.
That's number one. But that means I got a lot of questions for you. Okay? So the first thing I want to ask you about, of course, is the political landscape and what your expectation is for what happens in November. Because you've been on the campaign trail, not just in the state of Virginia, you've been in Georgia, you've been in Maine, you've been in Nevada, you're going to go to Arizona. So what is the vibe like?
Wisconsin?
Oregon, sorry, I missed a couple. You've been busy.
Kansas?
What's the vibe? What's the vibe out there?
So what I learned last year, and by the way, I want to reiterate, thank you again for having me. It is so much fun to be here. This is old home for me, and to get a chance to come back and be with all of you and talk about alpha, that's pretty cool. But what I learned last year, I think, is something that is repeating itself this year. What I learned last year was that there are real kitchen table concerns every night in Virginia families and American families, concerns about inflation and what's going to happen to their job and can they make ends meet, and to see grocery prices going through the roof and to see utility bills and college tuition and all of the things that families worry about. That is such a big deal. Second of all is what's happened in safety in my community. And violent crime's been on the rise across the country. And then third is what's happening in my school. And is my child getting the education that I want them to get, that they need in order to be prepared for life? These kitchen table issues have common sense solutions. And in fact, what we learned last year was it wasn't about Republicans versus Democrats. It was about these common sense solutions to these issues that really are concerning Virginians. And I believe that package of common sense solutions is the same set of solutions that need to be delivered this year in the election, and, oh, by the way, after people are elected into office. And so, by the way, how are we dealing with inflation? Are we printing more money? Are we, in fact, pretending it's not there? Are we putting brakes on the economy that make us feel like we're in a car with a 16-year-old driver? Or are we, in fact, trying to manage those in a way that does the best we can to, in fact, have a soft landing, maybe even a touch and go? Are we going to make sure that folks feel confident about the fact that their job will be there and not go away? That, in fact, their neighborhoods are safer than they were last year, and that their schools are schools that they can trust? I see these issues, and I hear it when I travel around the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I've had a chance to help governors campaign around the country. These same issues are on the ballot this year, and I expect that nationally, they're going to react the same way they did in Virginia last year.
Which is vote Republican. That's
where
I think you're headed here.
Yeah, I believe they will.
Do you think Republicans are going to capture control of the House, the Senate, or both?
Well, let me just begin with governors, because that's where I've been spending so much of my time. And then I'll get to the House, because in Virginia we have specific House races at play. We don't have any Senate races this year. First of all, governors. What states have seen, and America has seen over the course of managing through the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, is that states that were led by Republican governors have substantially outperformed states that were run by Democrat governors. And the data is so clear. I mean, out of the top 12 states in unemployment, 10 of them have Republican governors. And job recovery has been faster in Republican-led states than in Democrat-led states. Learning loss has been higher in states that were closed longer, and the states that were closed longer were run by were run by Democrat governors. And so the performance of states with Republican governors has just been better. And so I believe that every state should have a Republican governor. And therefore, part of what I've been, I think, trying to do is help candidates in states that look a lot like Virginia and help them win. Now, the reality, of course, is that the governor ends up being the top of the ticket in most elections. And the governor's outcome tends to influence over 85% of the time what happens down ballot. And so I do believe that in a lot of these states that are viewed as swing states for the House and for the Senate, we have really strong gubernatorial candidates. And so I feel pretty good about what's going to happen in Georgia, for example. And Governor Kemp is an extraordinary governor. He's done a great job. I feel very confident about what's going to happen in Nevada, because I do believe that Sheriff Lombardo is an extraordinary candidate.
What about Arizona?
And Arizona, I think Arizona is breaking right now towards a Republican win. Governor Ducey did an extraordinary job. When you look back at what Arizona has accomplished with reducing tax rates and accomplishing real choice in public schools, I think what people in Arizona are seeing is they want a Republican governor because they want to continue those policies. And so I think we'll see that coming.
Governor Ducey is not the nominee who is running now to head the state. It's Carrie Lake. And there's been some concern that she represents a different wing of the Republican Party. You said that you think every state should have a Republican governor, but I think there's a lot of question right now about what is a Republican. Is a Republican someone who, as you have said, believes that Joe Biden won the election? Or can a Republican also be someone like Carrie Lake, who you're going to campaign with, who believes that the election was rigged?
I believe that, in fact, they're all Republicans. And what we learned last year in my race was that bringing Republicans together is really important to win a race. And we were able to bring together forever Trumpers and ever Trumpers. And we were able to bring together libertarians and Tea Party members, independent voters. I mean, we won the independent moderate vote in Virginia, Democrats. And this is to recognize that all Republicans don't all believe the same thing. And in fact, I do think that there's a desire on behalf of, let's call them political analysts, to put people into buckets and to force that. And the reality, of course, is that it's not about buckets competing with one another. It's about bringing people together. And that's what we did in Virginia last year. Something that pundits thought was never possible, that a Republican could actually win in Virginia. Virginia was too blue. I think the pundits forgot to do one thing, which is ask voters. And what voters expressed clearly was a desire to see common sense solutions brought to bear against these most important issues. And when we were able to reduce taxes by $4 billion, something that has never been done in the Commonwealth of Virginia, by a factor of 4, and yet have a record investment in education, raise teacher salaries, invest in school facilities. Oh, by the way, introduce lab schools for choice in the Virginia public school system. Invest $400 million more into law enforcement to raise starting salaries by 20% to try to get at this depletion of manpower in our law enforcement community. We were able to accomplish a ton around doing things that people understood were moving Virginia forward. I think that's the future of the Republican Party, is how do we bring people together around these common sense solutions to these most challenging problems?
But even GOP leader Mitch McConnell has said that one of the things that he's concerned about in November is candidate quality when it comes to some of the Republican contenders that we're seeing. Are you worried about that? Do you think that the playing field is level when you look at some of the other folks who are running?
All candidates have strengths and weaknesses. I mean, one of my weaknesses was I had never done this before. I was sitting where you are back in 2020. And I stepped into a field that I really didn't have any experience with. And oh, by the way, for those of you that are having a midlife crisis, get into state politics. It's a great place to be. You can make a huge difference. But, of course, what we're seeing, and I was just specifically saying in Virginia, the congressional races in Virginia, we have extraordinary candidates. And we have 3 races that I think will be real bellwethers for whether the House of Representatives shifts or not. Jen Kagan's running in our 2nd Congressional District down at the beach. Yesley Vega running in our 7th Congressional District, which runs up into Northern Virginia. And Hung Cao running in what is Loudoun County. I mean, by the way, these are women and diverse candidates. They represent, I think, the Republican Party of the future. They represent what we saw in Virginia last year, which was the most diverse ticket that Republican or Democrats have ever put up in Virginia, with our lieutenant governor, who's the first black woman elected to statewide office, and, oh, by the way, an immigrant from Jamaica. And, of course, Jason Miyares, who's our attorney general, who is a first-generation Latino American, where his mother fled Cuba to get away from Castro. I believe this is the Republican Party of the future, and I'm excited to be part of it.
You said before we walked onto stage here that the November election could be a time for investors to reset.
Yeah.
How would you advise playing that?
Well, let me begin.
Put your financial hat back on.
Yeah, let me begin with, recessions are not determined by a computer. They're determined by sentiment. And when consumers get concerned, when boardrooms all of a sudden hesitate and pull back from investment or hiring, that's what causes recessions. And we're in a moment where everybody's talking about a recession. And if we remember, go back to 2016, where it was clear that we were going to head into a recession, and it was also broadly thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win. And what happened, of course, was there was a switch, a change. And when Donald Trump won, all of a sudden optimism went back into the market, and we avoided a recession. And so you look back to what can happen on November the 8th, and I do believe that there's a broad view that Republicans will take back the House, and I think there's a big question about what's going to happen in the Senate. I'm cautiously optimistic that I think that Republicans will take the Senate as well, and I think that will be a calming influence. That'll be a calming influence that now, instead of having single-party government, we have divided government, and that we could end up with, I think, a little bit more rational spending, because I do believe that what's come out of the Biden White House has, in fact, been disconnected from supply and demand of money, and in fact has driven a lot of our challenges right now, not to mention the fact that we gave up energy independence and we should have kept it. And the combination of that has driven a lot of this inflationary pressure. And so I do think that somewhat of a surprise with a Republican win in the Senate as well, I think will change the overall footing. And I am expecting that if that can happen, we can see, yes, a slowdown, but we won't see a hard landing. And that's as governor, I'm spending a lot of time working with industry across Virginia to understand, are you still moving forward with your investment plans? And I hear consistently, yes, we are. We're building that new factory. We're putting down that new distribution center. Are you still moving forward with your hiring? And what I hear over and over again is, yes, we are. And in fact, our biggest challenge is filling the open positions. And by the way, that's a really good thing when you're thinking about keeping people fully employed and confident about their future. And so I think there's a moment here where, yes, demand is feeling the real pressure from the rise in interest rates. But I do think that we can manage through this with an election outcome that I think restores balance. But on top of that, companies maintaining confidence, moving forward with their long-term investment plans, and maintaining their hiring plans. So
we've talked a lot about the economy, and you ran for governor focused on the economy. But right now, there is a big divide over social issues in this country. It's happening across the country. It's happening in Virginia as well. Yesterday, there were hundreds of students who walked out of their classrooms to protest the policies that they say are unfair to transgender students that the Virginia State Department of Education is putting forward. What's your response to those students who say our rights are being taken away?
First, I applaud the exercising of our First Amendment rights. I think that's a really.
So you support the protest?
It's a really important moment for us. As long as people are not violent, as long as they're not destructing things, I actually think that that's part of America, is to be able to exercise your First Amendment rights. I want to step back, however, and explain a bit about the context of this. And the context of this is that we had existing policy frameworks that specifically did not include parents in these decisions that are extremely important in children's lives, and in fact enabled schools to say that parents would specifically not be informed by decisions that children are making. And voters spoke loudly in Virginia last year that parents matter, and I believe that parents should be fundamentally engaged in this. And in fact, Virginia law states that parents have a fundamental right to be engaged in the education, the upbringing, and the care of their child. And so in this case, what we have done with draft policies is reestablish parents' fundamental role in making this decision with their child. By the way, not at the exclusion of a trusted teacher or a trusted counselor, but at the end of the day, it's a parent and a child. It's about families. You know, I think it's really clear that children don't belong to the state. They belong to families. And children have a right to, in fact, have parents engaged in these most important decisions. And oh, by the way, parents have a right to be engaged in their children's lives. The key for these policies is that if parents make a decision that, in fact, they would like for their child to have accommodations, then they will have them. And so I've asked people who have spoken out quickly to please read the policies, because I'm constantly reminded that people don't read anything anymore. They read headlines, not actually the body of the document. And in this case, I think that what people will find is that these policies are very much drafted with a fundamental belief in the necessity to protect all children, to protect their dignity, their confidentiality, and their safety. The word bullying is used 36 times in the document to reassure that we are doubling down on the fact there can be no harassment and no discrimination, and that parents must be at the center of these decisions that are made as a family. I think this is going to be an important moment for folks to recognize that we can have an and moment. This isn't an or moment. This is an and moment where we bring families in to an important decision that can be made that is in the child's best interest.
What happens when it's not just the students who are protesting, but also companies that might be upset with your decision? We've heard from the Salesforce CEO, for example, who has said that, in his words, there are crazy governors in states across the country who are rolling back rights for LGBTQ people, rolling back rights for women when it comes to abortion. And Salesforce has threatened to leave states that they feel are enacting policies that they don't agree with. What do you think about that? What would you do if they said, hey, we're out of here if you move forward?
Companies make decisions just like families do, and that is part of, I think, leading a company is deciding what is in that company's best interest, and oh, by the way, reflecting the desires and wants of shareholders and customers and a board and a management team, and oh, by the way, employees. I do believe that what companies have been saying very loudly over the course of the last many years is that when they assess the totality of where they want to be, there's been a very clear migration, and that migration has been to Virginia. That migration's been to Texas, it's been to Florida, it's been to Georgia. This is where companies are going. And
so you're saying they're bluffing when they may put forth a certain rhetoric or say a certain message, but they're voting with their feet.
Well, I don't know if I wouldn't say they're bluffing. I would just say that it's not universal that all companies are saying the same thing. And of course, what we're seeing is companies are making these decisions based on a totality of inputs. And those inputs seem to be predominantly resulting in companies moving to Virginia and Texas and North Carolina and Georgia and South Carolina and Florida. What we've seen in Virginia is we've had corporate relocations just in the last 6 months where Boeing left Chicago and came to Virginia, and Raytheon left Massachusetts and came to Virginia. We've had Lego assess the entire U.S. footprint and choose to put their only U.S. manufacturing in Chesterfield County in Virginia. We've watched companies that are in Virginia double down and expand within Virginia, like Hilton. And we've watched new industries come to Virginia. And just in the last month, we've been able to announce the real epicenter in Virginia of the indoor growing or vertical farming industry, where we will have the 2 largest indoor farms in the world in Virginia. So I think that what corporations constantly have to assess is the totality of where they're going to be and the environment they're going to be in. As a governor, my job, I think, is to be very transparent about where I believe Virginia is going. On day one, I announced Virginia's open for business. We are open for business. It had been shut, locked tight. We were ranked 47th in the nation in job recovery. 47th in the nation in job recovery. And now we're in the top 20. We, in fact, said we're going to get taxes down so that people can have a better lifestyle. We're going to invest in schools. We're going to invest in law enforcement. We put forth a regulatory management department to cut back the regulations that I thought were really damaging business. And we've watched job growth come back. We watched companies move. We watched them expand. And I think it's my job to be very transparent about what we're trying to get done in order to make Virginia the best state in America to do business. And so for those of you that are looking, please come look in Virginia because we have a lot to offer.
Well, if folks looked in Virginia and if Boeing and Raytheon and Lego called you up and said, hey, we don't really like this policy. We don't like this transgender policy. We're not happy with where you stand on abortion bans. What would you say to them?
Well, I would begin with read the policy and see where we stand. Because neither one of those statements is actually very correct. What we've done in Virginia, particularly on abortion, is recognize that Virginia elected a pro-life governor. And I'm very cognizant of where Virginia is today. We have a House that is controlled by Republicans and a Senate that is controlled by Democrats. Literally just 20 months ago, there was debates on the House floor to expand abortion rights all the way up through and including childbirth paid for with taxpayer money. And Virginians said that's too extreme. And I think that is way too extreme. And so I've asked for our leading legislators to work on a compromise bill to bring to my desk for a 15-week pain threshold bill where a child can feel pain. And we're working on trying to land that. And I think that's a good place for Virginia to land. And I believe that when it comes to policies with regards to our children, I believe that people universally understand that parents have a right to be engaged in their children's life. And I've always asked folks, if you don't think that parents should be engaged in their children's life, like many of the progressive Democrats said last year during my election, and my opponent said it very clearly, Virginians stood up and said, no, that's not what we believe. We think parents should be. And so, I don't think this is an either-or moment. I think that's what people try to do today, is put you in either this far box or that far box. And there is an and moment here, which is there is a path forward that respects parents' rights to be engaged in their children's lives and in fact, fully respects the child as well. So
you want to run as a unifier, it sounds like. You're operating as a unifier in a political environment that is extremely divided. Where do you see the Republican Party going? Do you see the Republican Party coming together, or there are some in the party who say it's splintering?
Let me begin with the fact that I'm an outsider, so I'm new to this. And at least my training is in a 30-year business career was that you set a path and you bring people around that path in order to try to get folks where collectively they're better than they were when they started. And that's what corporate strategy is about. That's what execution is about when you try to execute against your corporate strategy. And I think that's what we're doing in Virginia. And what that translates to is maybe a different way of thinking through this, which is the fact is we don't have to agree on everything because guess what? We don't. But we sure agree on a lot. And as I said earlier, we were able to bring together Republicans in a unique way last year. We had forever Trumpers and never Trumpers in the same room together, talking about what the best answer is, not debating one another. And we, in fact, found that we could bring Republicans and Democrats together and independents and moderates all in the same place around a shared vision. I think that's the future of the Republican Party, and I do believe that that's where America is right now. And I think it all gets back to focusing on issues that really are at the heart of people's lives.
So another fun fact for the crowd about Virginia, Virginia is term limited when it comes to how long the governor can serve. So you can only serve one term, right? You can only serve 4 years. Are you committed to serving out all 4 years of your term?
Yes. So first of all, let me just give a little background on that. So Virginia, of course, founders were the founders of our nation. And if you think back to folks like Thomas Jefferson, they weren't big fans of the executive branch. And so Virginia's own constitution has been constructed to limit the term of a governor. And so I have a 4-year term. And as what my whole goal is to be the best governor that I can be. I think we can accomplish a lot in 4 years. I had a really interesting moment when I was inaugurated. a FedEx package arrived, and I zipped it open, and I read the letter, and it was from Jeb Bush. And it said, "Governor, get moving. You only have 4 years." And inside,
exclamation point.
And inside was a clock counting down on 4 years. And I have that clock in my office. I go look at it every morning, and I recognize that we have a big agenda. And that big agenda, we only have 4 years to accomplish. And I'm committed to completing our agenda. And I think we can. One of our cabinet members said to me, "I've never experienced such a sense of urgency every day." And I said, "We only have 4 years, and we got a lot to get done."
What happens after those 4 years?
Well, I think I'm first going to celebrate my my 30th wedding anniversary with my lovely wife, and really reflect on the fact that we've been given a great gift to serve the way we have, and then we'll see what happens. I mean, I didn't plan to run for governor. I saw a moment where there was a real need in the Commonwealth of Virginia, in my view, and I stepped out of my dream job. I mean, I had a chance to lead a company that I had grown up in. And that moment was a big one for my family, where we committed ourselves to do something very different, to put ourselves in the public spotlight in a way that we never had been. And so I'll have a chance to discuss things with my wife and my kids again and decide what's next.
Would that discussion include a potential run for the White House?
That discussion will be whatever is available at the time. I have to say, there is a long way between here and there. I had somebody describe it as various ages, and an archaeologist will have to decide what happens between here and there. It's 2022, and my big focus right now is being the best governor that I can possibly be in Virginia, to get our agenda moving, which I'm very pleased with how much we've accomplished, and to help our congressional representatives win in Virginia, and to help a few governors.
Governor Youngkin, thank you so much for your time. If you come to a conclusion of your decision, please let us know.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Governor Youngkin. My name is Nick Dunn. I am filling in for Tyler.